All right, I'm back. Unfortunately, this is the best I can do at the moment. I have a handheld camera here. Um, so that's the general look up here, and I'm going to try getting closer here so you can see what's going on. So this is stuff that I found on my own. Two sides of 22 units, okay? Two equal sides of 22 units by a third side of 19 units. Whether this be in inches, whether this be in centimeters, whether this be in cubits or whatever else that there is out there. This is like a a fairly accurate um, um, mathematical formula here, geometrical formula. Yeah, 22 by 22 by 19. That gives you an angle, okay, of something pretty close to 51.42. Depending how accurate you want to get here and how nitpicky you want to get. And so if you use this type of mathematical logic from one corner of the pyramid's base to the middle, because remember I was saying, if you're looking down from a top view, you'll see that each side is built in two sections. Okay. Now there's a reason for that, and that is because you build from the center towards the ends. You don't build from the end to the center, the end to the center. It's much easier in construction and many other types of jobs where it's more logical and you get a better result if you work from the middle to the side, the middle to the side. Okay. So that's the one thing. And I have just worked these details out where I'll just quickly give you a run through them. This distance, wow, is this thing going to focus today? Yeah, it's about 8.5 units from that point to there. That distance from that tip to another tip, which would be another one of this on the other side. Yeah, on each face of the pyramid, you would need about two of those. And that distance in there, it is about 17 units. And this top part from the tip of there to the actual tip is approximately 13 units. So that gives us a height, a side, or pardon me, I forget how I worked that part out. I'm going to go with this for now. If I've made a mistake, I'll put it in my notes. But it's an approximate height of 27.5 units. Okay. Now, it's interesting that I found the unit of 22 because I was playing with inches. And it was 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches by 4 3/4. And now if you divide an inch by 4, that gives you 4 units. So every inch is 4 units. And so the 22 units comes from 5.5 inches. But I want to stick with the units here because it's the number that's important. Okay. I'm going to have to pause and put the other one up here. Oh, before I move from here, there is one other thing. So when I got to the top of this one here and to the top of the other one here, which is, let's just pretend that that's there as well. And when you join those two tips with a straight line, and then take a compass, okay, from that center point, and draw a circle, it's quite interesting that perhaps that is the approximate placement of where they left the tip off. And near the bottom of that circle, it's quite possible that that's where they have that entrance on the one side of it, yeah, where it's up, quite a bit ways up off the ground. There's like an entrance type thing here, a door or something like that. And obviously everybody knows about the flat top. I'm just speculating here that perhaps maybe this type of math was used to determine those two factors. After all, they're not going to wing this stuff. Even if they are not as advanced, they still have some kind of mathematical, logic that they're at least going to, go by as closely as possible. So that's the other point. And I'll be right back. Okay. So this is just a bit more information on when you're looking at it, straight on from one side. And like I said, you can see each one of them has a center line going through it, which means they worked two halves to build the one side, each side. So it appears to have 8, faces to it, right? And I'm going to go by the math that I found, where someone or many of them perhaps have worked it out to approximately that each side at its base is 440 cubits. Well, the 22 units is actually very convenient for this math. 22 times 20 is 440. So each half there would have been 22 times 10, 220, and 220, giving you a total of 440. Yeah. And using my, calculations earlier, I came up with 220 would go to about there, and the remainder is approximately 130 units, giving you 350 units for the length of that side. And the height being 27.5 units. Okay? And that's to the very tip, not to where it's actually left the tip off, which is intentional. And I believe that the reason for the missing very tip is that that's supposed to be the house of the sun. Yeah? If you don't follow that logic, well, okay, whatever. But anyways, there is a logical reason for this stuff without going into, overextending meanings to these things. What else did I write here? Larger blocks on the bottom, smaller towards the top. The blocks are roughly cut on the outsides. Yeah, I already went over that. Work from each middle to the outer points. Okay, yeah, I mentioned that already. So that's how the construction side of thing is going here. And like I said, they would have needed a central type of tower, or a tower plus like a pole on the end of it, and they would have need to have run their maypole type of lines. Pull them taut and fasten them to these points. And they would have pre-measured, because they know the math, right? They have already worked out the math. They have the calculations for the lengths of these various parts, and they would have had these 4 equal size, ropes coming off the pole from the center top to the corners, and then they would have had another set of 4 working to the middles. Right? So it's 4 and 4. And they would have needed to keep something, a line going horizontally as they built up the steps So there'd be another set of lines working this way, one that way, one that way. And they would have built this because you need a center structure here. How else can you have your angles? Yeah, you can get away with doing the perimeter, which is just a square, without running, your lines up there. But you have to have these lines up here. You have to have these maypole-like lines. Those are your guidelines. You're putting in pretending that's the line there. You're putting in your massive size stones, like that in there. Whoops, that ends in the middle there. But anyway, you get the picture, and they get a bit smaller and a bit smaller and a bit smaller as they work their way up. And when they've built a side or two or possibly three up to that point, okay, they would then finish off. Maybe they left this point halfway up there or something. Then they would come back and finish the rest of it, because you would have this side built and the one behind it built. You could just simply, by this point, you're running your lines sideways, perhaps. And that point, the center is removed. Yeah, when it's no longer necessary, because you have the other side, enough of the rest of the construction of the building, that you no longer need your center to run all these lines off of. So, I'm not sure if I've left anything out here. One last look at this. What's also interesting here, in this mathematical, logic that I'm using here, where you build your two sides up first, using these 22 by 22 by 19s, this angle in here, interestingly enough, is 51.42. This one in here is equal to that. And the top, if you guys are not familiar with your angles of 7, that's 77 point something. I forget which one it is. It's 77.14 or is it 77 point, 25 or something like that. But anyway, that's your 77 is up there. And it was just interesting that is 51. So it gives you a kite shape in there. And this little part here, I'm hypothesizing that perhaps they drew a circle, in their blueprints on here, and then they used that as reference to where they wanted to end the top of that structure, and possibly where that little entrance is on the bottom of that circle. So anyway, I hope that was interesting for anybody. So if you want to go from your 22 units into a larger scale, right, you simply times it. In this case, I times it by 10 to get 220 to 220 to give you the 440, times that by 10, 220, times that by 10, which was 13 units, which gave me 130, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this is approximately 17 units, the diameter of that circle, so that would be approximately 170, right? Timesing by 10. Everything you're timesing by 10. That this from the bottom of the circle to the midpoint, 8.5 times 10 would be 85 units. Okay. I might have left out a little detail here and there, but I think I've done enough. Thank you.